Digital transformation is happening indeed. So please welcome on the stage to discuss the newest connectivity, Dr. Bilel Jamoussi, Chief of the Study Groups Department, ITU, Kjellander, VP of Middle East CSG, Imran Malik Khan, Global VP of Middle East Global VP Fixed Data SES, Yehia Sefraoui, Director of Digital Transformation INWI, Stefan Rose, Global GM of Telecommunication Industry IBM, Deepak Winston, Director and Emerging Tech EY. And moderating this session will be Zayan Sadek, SP Director, Cisco Systems ME.
Good afternoon, good evening, good thing for all the survivors today. We hope we make it up for you with the rich content, with the esteemed panelists that we have here. We're going to talk today about digital transformation and basically how is it converted into reality and the impact on the connectivity and the impact of connectivity on the digital transformation. Digital transformation is happening after the pandemic and with sustainability motivation for each telco, for each CSP, for each enterprise. Digital transformation is becoming more and more important. We started to see businesses adopting a digital-first model. Everything that can be delivered digitally must be delivered digitally. And for that, digital transformation agendas are becoming more of a mandate rather than a priority. And with that as well, we want to start with Daniel to see why digital transformation basically is becoming on the top agenda of each executive for each CSP and enterprise as well.
Thank you, Zayan. Dear panelists, and let me start with the audience. Great to see everyone back in second year in a row post-pandemic. Big thanks to Telecom's Review Summit. Very good for pulling us together. And I have to say, Mr. Tony Eid isn't here, but he is a bit of a rock star in this industry. So Tony, thanks for bringing us together. The question, Zaid, I would say digital transformation is really a journey. Some people would think this is something you do once. In our world, I think we need to acknowledge that there's no start, there's no end to it. With technology continuing to develop and CSPs and customers across the globe needing to advance, this is an everlasting journey, and it will so continue. Now, the challenge would clearly be for some CSPs that comes from a brownfield, having double-digit million-dollar subscribers to take care of, and then you want to do a digital transformation. There might be a tendency of going for the easy first and fixing what you can. And our view of that would be that you need to start from a catalog-driven approach, where you can get proper system support for the transformation and changes that you want to do. You can then cherry pick where you think that your changes can make the biggest effect on your end customer base. And that would be the way to advance so that you can support your customers. And getting to that position in this market environment, staying ahead of competition, I think you need to continue to invest. And that's where we're coming from a digital, everlasting process going forward.
And how is it converted into reality right now?
I would say you need to come to a position where you have support for your business. Before, customers were looking to, and telecom operators and CSPs were looking to advance from where they're coming from, getting more customers on board and driving more of what they were used to do. Now, leveling up and partnering with a wider industry, going from a solo player to a marketplace player, where the B2B2X proposition comes into play, having support for automating that in a way to drive efficiencies to start with, make sure that you utilize your existing capabilities Two, the customer experience is always going to be key. Having your customer front and center of everything and every engagement and every decision that you make is going to be key to become and retain your competitive situation. And thirdly, I would say, driving new revenues, as we all need to do, profitable revenues, taking that leap into the future, finding partners and becoming more relevant for your existing customer base is going to make you more competitive in your future customer base as well.
Thank you, Daniel. Yehia, you come from CSP, from INWI. How did you drive the digital transformation within your organization as an SP, and what have been the most critical digital and data use case leveraged in INWI basically to drive this transformation?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Telecom Review, for the invitation today. So yeah, the digital transformation for INWI as a telco operator has been a very long journey. It started with the fact that INWI has always defined itself as an innovation disruptor in the market, and has always strived to put on innovation first. That being said, we came to a realization quite rapidly that actually more and more our customers are going to be judging us compared to the level of exigence that some digital native companies offer in terms of customer experience. So today everyone has WhatsApp, has Netflix, Google, etc., and everyone is used to use those products. So our customers are more and more judging us to that level of standards, and you rapidly come to the realization that digital transformation and digital as a service, as a way to offer your customer experience, is going to be absolutely key, not only in creating a competitive advantage, but also in your survival long term. So the way INWI approached digital transformation is, well, of course, like any other exercise, by first setting up a vision. And our vision for the digital transformation was structured around 4 or 5 pillars. The first one is how do we offer the most distinctive customer experience to our to our clients across all channels while leveraging digital. And let me just insist on something. When I say all channels, that also means non-digital channels, where we can leverage the power of digital. Because in a market such as the Moroccan market, we are not yet in terms of total penetration of digital channels. So we need to be very realistic into how we are approaching the topic. So for this first pillar, we identified a few use cases, as you mentioned. Of course, one big one around how do we autonomize our clients through self-care offering and e-commerce platform, etc. So client autonomy is one big topic. A second one, which was actually a kind of a big success for us, was creating, pushing innovation where we could. And one of the innovations that we pushed was creating the first 100% telco operator in the region, where we are actually offering 100% telco products that the client uses exclusively on digital channels. Apart from that, we are also looking at the client experience within our physical shops, because we believe that the future is going to be hybrid. It's going to be digital and physical. So we are also, let's say, doing the end-to-end transformation of our client experience within our shops. But also we are equipping our sales force with digital tools, especially the retail sales force that's not sitting in shops but doing door-to-door and so on. We are equipping those guys with digital tools as well. So this is for the first pillar. We also identified a few other pillars, notably around data. How do we leverage data to increase CVM, to extract more value from some of the initiatives that we implement and from some of the efforts, especially on the digital marketing that we do. The third pillar focuses on inward processes, especially how do we use digital and robotization to improve some of the processes that we have internally, like supply chain, finance, client service, to actually improve the level of service that we are providing to our client. The fourth pillar around mainly how do we use digital to enlarge the spectrum beyond the core? Like how do we associate external adjacencies to what we are offering? And maybe one last pillar or one last positive benefit from this whole transformation is also the capabilities that we built. We can, as a telco and as a company that's offering services to other B2B companies, we are able to leverage some of our capabilities and bring that offering to other B2B players. So yeah, that's how we thought about the strategy. However, in order to actually achieve that strategy, we needed also to think about a few enablers to make that happen, amongst which the backbone transformation. It can't be just a front. It needs to be a front-to-end transformation. But also, how do we approach talent? In our region, in Morocco especially, it's honestly, the word is, it's a talent war. It's especially for those digital profiles that are in very much high demand right now. You need to be able to attract them and avoid the churn as well. And also, how do we approach our strategy with our partners? Because such a transformation can only happen with the partners and strong and resilient partners. So yeah, that's how we thought about our transformation. A few of those use cases that I mentioned are already actually implemented, and a few of them have already been successful in generating impact.
Thank you, Yehia. Thank you. I think this goes well. You touched on multiple points, very important points in the digital transformation journey. When we talk about customer experience, that's something that sits at the core of every transformation. And I think when we talk about, from a pillar perspective in a digital transformation, and we talk about how we could reimagine the application and how we could transform the infrastructure and the services consumption from a multi-cloud, private cloud environment over a secure network, this goes on to be able to secure and to enable our customers to have a unique, consistent operation and experience. And this sits well, I think, with your strategy. You touch also on capabilities, and I think that's something that every organization needs to work on, how to make sure they can build up and leverage the capabilities of the team that is building this. Stephen, in one of your interviews, you described the industry disruption as one of more than go-to-market, but rather the whole value chain. How is this related to the digital transformation? And what is the impact of digital transformation on the value chain?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned earlier on, I mean, one of the things around key enabler being horizontal cloud. So I think that the challenge with the industry is that to some extent it's been working on a rather fragmented basis. We have a lot of things that are guiding us, standards obviously being one of those things, and the value chain, typically works with that. But also we've been working very much on vertically integrated stacks up until now. I think as we move to horizontal cloud, I think that gives us two key things. One, it gives us the ability to deploy workloads on various different clouds, whatever they will be, whether they be on-prem, or whether they be private, or whether they be anything in between. So I think that's the first thing. Very, very key to understand what are the workloads that I've got, where do I want to deploy them, and what is the optimal TCO around that, and then being able to use any particular cloud provider for that. That's number one. The second thing is actually being able to then have the value chain embrace the horizontal cloud and the operating system around that. It's going to be absolutely key. The main reason for that, of course, is that then we will effectively have a universal way in which we will deploy technologies in the future, and as a result of that, then we can get everybody commonly aligned. And there'll be a whole stack of reasons why we want to do that, including a number of the reasons that we discussed in the previous panels around efficiency and other ESG type goals. So I think those are the main considerations for that.
Thank you, Stephen. Dr. Bilal, what's your insight from an ITU perspective on the current status of the digital transformation globally?
So the digital transformation, as I mentioned this morning, is one of the 2 pillars or strategic objectives of the ITU, because what our members, the whole world, found after COVID is that without the digital platform, there was no lifeline. You could not study, you could not work, you could not see a doctor, you could not make any payments. And we believe, our studies show that the digital transformation has been accelerated by about 6 years thanks to COVID. What does this mean in the future for us and for all countries around the world is that this process that was triggered in COVID is something that we have to pick up the momentum and continue it in a more strategic fashion. And really, I think Andrew Feinberg this morning mentioned the dimensions of the digital transformation, which I retained from his discussion, is that there is a regulatory aspect to the digital transformation to allow it, and I spoke about it in terms of bringing or marrying the regulator of telecom to the central bank to do financial inclusion or digital financial services, to get the transportation ministry and the telecom regulator to get intelligent transportation systems, to get the city planners and mayor to actually do a digital transformation of the city itself. So that regulatory enabling framework must be there to allow for the digital transformation to happen. The other dimension is, of course, the technical dimension. We cannot talk about digital transformation without connectivity. We cannot talk about digital transformation without having a digital platform, a data center, a place where the data is housed and processed. We cannot talk about digital transformation without a digital ID. How can the citizen access digital services without an identifier, a digital ID? So there are certain building blocks that are technical. Connectivity, data centers, digital ID are sort of some of the prerequisites to building a digital transformation ecosystem. And probably the most important is the cultural transformation and the user ability to use the digital platforms. So the literacy, the digital literacy of the citizen to change from transacting in cash to transacting over the mobile phone is an example of the cultural transformation that needs to be in place to be able to do mobile money and really transform the financial space. So the way we try to mentor and work with our member states, especially in developing countries, is to first have the standards to allow this to be standards-based transformation, digital transformation, to do the capacity building of the policymakers, the engineers in the countries who are going to oversee the digital transformation, and of course provide the tools for the average citizen to have the literacy to pick up. So a case in point, we've been working on financial inclusion for almost 10 years now. First group that we launched was in 2014, a focus group on digital financial services. It was to bring the telco regulator with the central banks, have the dialogue on an enabling environment for the regulation. We had another working group looking at the technology. So in order to cater for financial inclusion, whether the person has a cheap phone, you know, the old Nokias with just no smartphone, no display, or having a high-end smartphone. You need to be able to have access to the mobile finance throughout the spectrum of devices. So when you have a cheaper phone, you're using USSD channels or you're using SMS for your access. When you go into the higher end, you're going to be using Android or iOS, etc. One of the key elements in that journey is the security and trust of the user for the financial transaction. Because if you, as a user, have any doubt that your money is going to be transacted properly, you're not going to use the service. So it's important, that's the area that we worked on in terms of providing the standards and the guidance and the training so that the USSD channels are secure. The SS7 signaling protocol, which is the fundamental building block of all telephony, mobile or fixed. It's the signaling protocol that was developed by the ITU more than 30 years ago, is vulnerable. There are many security holes today, and our study group that developed that protocol has put in place a number of plugs to make sure that there is no intercept, there is no replay of SMSs and so on that you use for OTPs. And so these are some examples in terms of the digital transformation for mobile finance that you can take and replicate in other sectors, digital health, transportation, smart cities, and so on.
Thank you, Dr. Bilal. I think I wanted to ask you basically about the role of government in enabling a digital life cycle. And I think you touched on most of the areas that a government should be basically regulating or taking into account. How does government, in addition to what we just discussed, boost or accelerate the creation of the whole ecosystem?
The government plays a key role in this because, for example, the digital ID is something that has to be authenticated based on a trust anchor point. And that's usually your national ID or your biometric information. So, for example, in India, the government put in place a system called Aadhaar, which is a very frugal, very cheap way of giving a unique digital ID to every resident in India, 1.3 billion people, in a fairly short amount of time. And the records in the databases, basically the name and last name, first name, last name, gender, address, age, and basically those are the basic records, and the biometrics, fingerprint and iris. With that database, which was developed and populated by the government, all the services, mobile finance, getting a SIM card, accessing digital health records, all refer to that database. So that's a good example where government could step in or must step in to provide a unique digital ID for the citizens. There are other services that the government needs to house. And of course, the connectivity. There are areas that are low density in population, and the operators are not going to invest there because there is no ARPU, no return on investment. And that's where the government has to step in with Universal Service Fund to enable that connectivity for those populations in remote areas and urban areas, because without connectivity, we cannot talk about digital transformation. So the government role is to incentivize and put in place the building blocks, connectivity, digital ID, digital platforms, and provide the enabling environment, regulatory, so that the private sector can invest and grow that initial investment.
Thank you, Dr. Bilal. Yehia, coming from a CSP background and with the experience you've got through this journey, what is the areas you think that government could have helped you accelerate your journey?
I think that a lot of things have already been said, but maybe if I can add on just maybe 2 or 3 ideas where government has a clear role to play. One is probably regulation. So I think it has been discussed a lot today, especially regarding cloud, data privacy, sovereignty, etc. Making that regulation very clear and very actionable is really key sometimes in accelerating digital transformation. And we've seen how in some countries the fact that the regulation was not clear enough, it's actually kind of slowed the developments of some of those key technologies like the cloud that are true enablers for digital transformation. A second area that I can think of is probably talent. And this echoes a lot to what we are facing in our region, but I think it's global right now. There is a play to be done on education and actually training the right talents for the transformation. Clearly, all companies are looking now for digital talents, and the government can play a key role in sensitizing people, sensitizing candidates, and creating those filières d'expertise, right? That's a second thought. Maybe another one is probably fostering an innovation environment. Companies like telco companies, we actually tend to need smaller startups that come with innovation products to actually accelerate some very specific issues sometimes. And having an ecosystem of startups within the country can be a big accelerator. Yeah. And maybe one last area where the government can also have a play is probably in educating or sensitizing people on the use of those digital products through their own e-government products. Like whatever you digitize in terms of government administrative offerings, you're also pushing people to go more and more towards those types of products, digital products, and to trust them much more. So if the government is showing that he trusts digital, then citizens are going to be much more trustworthy towards digital solutions. So yeah, the government definitely has a play to.
Thank you, Yehia. So expanding on the role of government, I want to double down on the impact of digital transformation to diversify and decentralize the economy, or creating new economies in the rural areas, improving the quality of life, enabling new industries such as agriculture 4.0, new food value. So Imran, what's your view on the rural broadband implementation, and basically who pays for it and how to do it right?
Right, so I represent the connectivity part on this panel, and as Dr. Bilal had pointed out, that without connectivity, digital transformation is not possible. So when we are talking about transforming economies, making the entire countries digital, there's no better medium than satellites to be able to accomplish this in a very, very short amount of time. And I'll share with you a few quick examples. But before I do that, I just wanted to also take this opportunity to share with the audience and everyone that the satellite industry has also gone through a transformation. The last 12 years have been phenomenal in terms of the innovation, and the satellites are no longer monolithic, where we only have one satellite 36,000 kilometers above the surface of the Earth, which is being used for video broadcast as well as for limited amounts of data. The last 12 years, the innovation has been fueled by private sector investments, and one data point for everyone is that according to industry sources, there has been $23 billion worth of investment that has flown into space and satellite-related activities, and this has made it possible for newer satellites to come into place. So the user, which in this case would be the governments to digitize the economies, they have choices now. They're no longer limited to the wide beam satellites of the past, which tended to be very expensive to operate and very, very limited bandwidth. Now they have choices to high throughput satellites, to very high throughput satellites, and also to satellites in different orbits. So we have medium Earth orbit and also the low Earth orbits as well. So SES, which I represent, has both satellites both in the GSO, the geostationary orbit, the high throughput satellites in GSO, as well as medium Earth orbits. So all of this has made it possible to deploy or to solve the connectivity part, in Dr. Bilal's words, to extend the edge of the network to places where commercial operators would not go. And all of that has been made possible by the will of the governments to use the Universal Service Obligation funds to incentivize operators to go into these places to be able to extend the digital reach. And the different orbits play, the GEO as well as the MEO, and in very future the low Earth orbits, now makes it possible for the users to have choices. And this transformation that I've just talked about is not going to stop. There are other very deep-pocketed players which are coming into this marketplace as well. The established players like ourselves are going into the next phase of the medium Earth orbit. So we are launching an Empower constellation, which will enable tens of gigabits of capacity to be broadcast, and we would be able to establish connectivity and enable entire countries to do digital transformation. So satellites are essentially an essential part of speeding up digital transformation on very, very large scales. And I wanted to highlight two examples. One is Indonesia, a country that realized, and this was coming right from the top, the president chose digitization as one of his key projects, and they were able to, within a very short period of time, able to digitize the economy. And there are studies which have proven that as digitization proceeds, the GDP increases, and those of you who have been to Indonesia or have been going to Indonesia for the last 10, 12 years, you can see a noticeable difference. And a lot of other countries are following the same example now.
Thank you, Imran. If we look at this and we look at the value proposition currently of the CSPs, and their value proposition is moving from a telco towards a techco. And we see the satellite operators right now moving into providing connectivities for areas of need, such as the rural areas, to accelerate digital transformation. Do you see yourself now in a competition or a complementing value proposition with the CSPs?
No, we are very much part of the value chain. We can't replace them. It's more like a cooperation. Because our remit begins where the normal terrestrial network ends. So it's very much a cooperation, and countries and operators who have now realized that satellites are no longer the choices of last resorts because of the innovations that I've talked about, and the cost of operating satellites is not what it used to be. So they're intelligently deploying satellites in their infrastructure. The next innovation that's going to come around is on the ground segment. The space segment has seen majority of the innovations. Access to space has become much more cheaper than it used to be before. The next innovation is the antennas. The antennas still are parabolic, clunky, but when the flat panel antennas and variable antennas come around, which is just a couple of years away, then satellites are going to become more and more and more mainstream. And one of the things that was mentioned is the standardization, and the governments are also now, and ITU is at the forefront, is trying to standardize the interconnectivity between the different networks. So that will also enable the cooperation between the different networks.
Thank you. Digital transformation fuels the digital economy, and analysts believe that we are currently in the digital transformation era, but we're moving soon towards the digital business era, where the business would become only digital. Where today SaaS solutions dominate, but moving soon towards the digital business era, it will become a totally depending on digital experience. So talking about when will digital transformation happen completely across the world? What's your views on that, Imran? And how do you differentiate between the different industries and the life cycle of different industries when it comes to its life cycle across the digital transformation?
Yeah, I suppose at the beginning,
Deepak, sorry.
Yeah, at the beginning, Daniel made a good point that the end point of digital transformation is not fixed. So, and this will keep on moving as technology evolves. So we haven't even started defining what things like quantum are going to bring, right? So in the current technology state, if we freeze that, I think what we need to understand is where is the beginning, what's the current state of play, and then how far can we reach in the current technology, but then as the goalposts keep moving, how do you further digitalize, right? So if I just take kind of 3 examples, and I'll use the number 30% for those, right? And if you just look at the world population, as Dr. Bilal mentioned in the morning, still 30% of the world population, around 3 billion people, are not connected yet. So things like satellite and others. So first, we have to provide that level of connectivity if you want to address B2C. And ultimately, B2B has to make money out of B2C. Right? So that's the first 30%. The second is, I was just quickly flipping through my phone. Typically, next time you look at it in your mobile device, you'll find that everyone on the average will be having about 60 to 90 apps. And you'll find that around 7 to 8 sectors are covered on those apps already. Anything from banking, commerce, retail, all your supermarket chain, your airline, your Uber travel, and so on. So that represents only 30% of what the economy is out there, right? Still 70% of those GDP, the word 100 trillion, is still produced by the B2B companies.
Yeah.
Now, if you take that last 70%, still those companies have only digitized 30%. So you have this 30-30-30 conundrum, which really needs to be fixed. And then it's a matter of what is your timeline, what does the value bring, as rightly pointed out, what is the customer experience? And I'll give you a good example. I think all of us have used airline application apps, right? So you look at simple things like boarding. 10 years back, 15 years back, it was such a complex thing where you had tickets pay to go and ring up, you had to go at the counter and do that. Now you can select your seat. And interestingly, even in EY, we have a digital app where you can select the seat in our building, right? So one of the things I do is I try to find whether there's a window seat looking at the river before I go to the office, right? Then I kind of go up and down the floors. So if that's the level of digitization you want, where you sit and you're sitting at home and you want to do everything, and the only B2B app I have on my phone is an ERP app where I can apply and say approve some kind of transaction going between some supplier sending something to EY, right? Now imagine that's the kind of experience you want to have as a B2B. That's the end goal, right? And I don't think it's going to happen within the next decade. Maybe it's going to finish maybe 60, 70%. Then there's going to be trillions of investment happening in that space. Yeah.
Thank you, Deepak. I think I go back to you, Stephen. It will never end. That's what you said. It will never complete. It's going to be ever evolving to keep pace with the constantly changing environment. Anything you want to add here?
I think you're right, and goodness knows if it does end, how depressing that would be. So no, I don't think it should ever end, of course. But I think it's a mindset shift that we're really looking for in the industry when it comes to what are the critical enablers to actually accelerate digital transformation. We have a tendency to look at the industry and complain that we're not growing fast enough and whatnot. So actually, there are a number of things that we need to consider. One is laying down foundational elements of technology enablers. One is creating a digital fabric. We talked about this before, making sure that there is democratized data sets that are available across the value chain, making sure that there is a willingness to actually create a data fabric across the value chain. If you do that, ultimately you'll democratize the data, you'll figure out how to do different things with it, you'll play with it in sandboxes. Those are very, very key elements of that. And the way that you will actually then get better innovation out of that is if you elect proactively a shared benefits scheme. There must be a way in which we can incentivize across the value chain rather than myopically focus for individual profits. So there's a bit of a mindset shift that we need to come around with that. I think the other elements, and we talked about these things as well. Government provides the conditions for success, so I think that's a very key element of that. And innovation has to be the focus rather than worrying about TCO obsession. There is a bit of a TCO obsession in the industry. I get it. I actually think a TCO obsession should be much more focused around: are we optimizing for greater levels of digitization operationally? And that way, then we of course then have less of an environmental impact. But again, if we move ourselves into innovation space and get government to actually enable smaller firms to become part of the ecosystem within the very large firms, telco operators and big firms like IBM, we're big organizations. We're difficult to do business with in many respects because we run big processes, because we know how to engage large organizations one large organization with another. But there are millions of smaller providers out there that have got great ideas. What is the environment that we can create for them, and how do we bring them in? And then not dominate them through, let's say, assertive procurement processes. So there are practical, pragmatic things that we need to come back to and say, are we conducting our business in a way that is supportive and transformative, or are we still running the same processes? And if we are, then surprisingly enough, we're going to get the same results.
Thank you, Stephen. I think we've got 1 more minute left, and I want to close with Daniel. We started with Daniel, and we close with Daniel. Daniel, digital transformation obviously aims towards achieving efficiency, innovation, and sustainability. Mm-hmm. What is the outcome of the digital strategies and plans executed so far?
I think connecting to the last question again, I don't want transformation to end. I might be a bit biased because I represent CSG, a provider into the CSP. We've worked with, for instance, MTN for the past 20 years, Talk for 10 years, and now with Mobile in Saudi Arabia for the last 10 years. Where does those companies want to end up? They want to serve their customer base more efficiently. That is absolutely key. Putting the customer right and center is what needs to happen, and taken into consideration for any transformation. Secondly, out of 3, would be that you need to do it cost efficiently, and you need to have the right platform for it. And thirdly, doing so by continuing to grow. This region is really exciting from a perspective that regulation has been a bit slow. Some areas, healthcare, transformation, smart cities, is fast forward running, but others, in terms of network sharing, is slightly behind. So I'm very excited to see what's going to happen in the Middle East, and growing the business and observing where the future takes us.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, gentlemen. Thanks for your valued insight. Thanks for the audience. Thanks for the survivors. And we hope that we had some insightful discussion at the end of the day. Enjoy your evening. Enjoy your rest of the day.